becoming weaponless. What makes this happen is because the AI is programmed to react to the player. So when they get stuck by a grenade, they think they're gonna die. They go into what I like to call melee mode, where their AI is effectively broken and all they want to do is path toward the player, if they can see. This is super worth experimenting with if you want to get that lasso achievement. Now let me take you back briefly to the BXR that was mentioned earlier. Instead of using a BR, if you use a shotgun and add a jump input on the end of that BXR, you can get what's called a shoddy boost. This is a must-have in easy mode speedruns. The combination on standard controls is BXRA, and what you're doing is meleeing at an enemy, killing them, and keeping the momentum from the lunge going while adding a jump on the end to get further distance. Using this correctly throughout a speedrun can save minutes upon minutes. Following this is melee canceling. This can be used in a few different ways, so let's do the basic one first. This is a speedrun mechanic. You can use a couple of different combinations of inputs on your controller, but I'll just explain the one that I'm the most comfortable with. The jump, crouch BYA, jump, connect. Sounds complex, I know. Just wait till we get to butterflying. Okay, so breaking this down. You jump toward an enemy and aim slightly over their head. Once you're close enough, you want to melee, then hold crouch, swap weapons, and then jump again. What is happening is that you have a decent size melee range even when you're aiming above the target. You are purposely trying to go over their head, and that's the part that the crouch helps with. The weapon swap cancels the melee attack from actually trying to connect to the enemy, and then the second jump lets you jump off of the enemy's head. This will send you flying past the enemy. On the other hand, this is not the only way a melee cancel can be useful. A perfect example is on Cairo Station, right at the very start. Tram skip. To simplify, you're betraying allies to make them enemies, so you can melee lunge off them. But basically, you're just trying to get past an invisible barrier. You punch a Marine into a specific spot, and then simply you just BYB or BXB, either works. This allows you to skip the first half of the mission and save almost a minute in time. Mastery of this changed the speedrun forever. Now for the complicated one. Butterfly. The easiest way to explain this is that you are piloting an enemy using melee canceling. I'm going to make a full in-depth tutorial on every aspect of this trick, but for the sake of this video, I'll explain just the basics. You can find this mostly used on High Charity to skip the entire mission. You lure a flood to the edge of the map and shoot his arm off while he is running. This stops him from shooting you and allows for you to melee chain him into a dead zone. A dead zone is just a spot on the map where the AI doesn't have the ability to move. Pretty much, if the AI can't shoot you, and they can't path to you, they just stand there. That's what makes this consistent. You use the melee chain to make him continue to melee and lure him into this area. Up next, you push him close to the edge of the map and walk off while looking up at the enemy, and then start a BY spam to catch and pull him off onto your head. Once he's on your head, you start the rhythm of BYA, which is melee, weapon swap, jump. I know you were wondering how you can just jump off of it. My theory is that because the enemy is standing on your head, he is connected to you, and the game thinks that because he's standing on you and is connected to you, that your feet are actually touching some sort of surface, and that's what allows you to jump even though there's no ground under you. Butterflying is most of the time done backwards, as that is the way where it seems like you have the least resistance from the enemy and can move the fastest. Once you're at the desired spot to start dropping into the end level trigger, you do a BY spam and try to maintain looking at the flood if you are going too fast so you can catch him. Once you get that stop, then you can simply do a melee cancel, which is just BY under the enemy, and drop into the end level trigger. Now, disclaimer here. This is an oversimplification of this trick. Another video way more in depth is still to come. Stay tuned. To piggyback off of the BY spam used in butterflying, you can actually levitate forever above an enemy that is standing still. You simply hold down on the left stick so you're looking at the enemy, and you spam BYA on standard controls. This gives you an infinite loop of meleeing and canceling. The melee is literally allowing you to levitate. Okay, let's switch things up a bit and go over some sword glitches. Sword canceling and sword flying. Obviously, you need the sword for this, and sword canceling is very similar to melee canceling, but instead you use right trigger or whatever button you would use to do the main sword attack. You still want to aim near the top of the enemy, as well as crouch, but with the velocity that comes off of sword lunges, you can go sailing off into the distance pretty easily. This brings up a nice little glitch at the end of the Arbiter called Glass Clip. Using some hitbox displacement, more on this later, you can sword lunge through glass. This is just one of the many ways the sword is the go-to weapon in campaign. And now for the most used glitch in Halo 2, sword flying. The button combination is YXR. How this works is you take whatever weapon you have and get a red reticle. Once you have that red reticle, you swap weapons, cancel the animation swap, and then sword lunge. When done correctly, you are tricking the game into thinking that the sword can actually do a standard sword attack from any distance that you can get a red reticle with. This is a 3-frame trick. So as long as all the buttons are not hit on the exact same frame, then the fly will work. Where things get complicated is when the frame rate of the games is really, really high. This makes sword flying way harder. Basically, the more frames that pass per second, the less time you have to do the inputs correctly. This does take some practice to get down, so my advice would be to load up off-host with a friend, because there you'll have a little bit of input delay or lag, and that will make things a little easier. The swordfly is used in just about every mission of Halo 2 speedrunning and is a staple of the run itself. But just to break that down a little bit more, YXR is simply just the start of sword flying. There are a lot of other sword flies in the midst of this mechanic. For example, if you YXR A, which is, you sword fly and then you jump, you can actually jump off of the air and go flying way past an enemy. There's also the forced mid-air stop sword fly, which is you YXR A and then look away from the enemy, and you can force the game to stop you above the enemy. And then there is also the YXR, which is, it's kind of the basic one, but instead of just flying to the enemy, if you YX and then hold R, you can kill the enemy, and that way you don't have to deal with them once you get them. The most complicated of the sword flies is the YXR hold X, which is only seen at the end of Cairo Station. And what you're doing is you're positioning a plasma pistol, and then you're sword flying off of an enemy, grabbing the plasma pistol mid-fly, and then jumping over the enemy, so that way you can take a plasma pistol or a nuke combo into the final room of Cairo Station. Sword flying is insane. Let's move on to glitches with the character model. First up is the tantrum. To make this simple, this is literally just jumping over and over again on a flat surface until you stand on air. Sounds made up, right? Yeah, I know, but trust me when I say it's real. To break it down and explain what's happening, your character model has a standard idle animation. Like if you just stand there and don't touch your controller, your character will give the impression of breathing. This is where the glitch comes. If you jump, and at the peak of your jump, your character model is finishing that idle animation, the game restores your hitbox to its base position, and that will lock you in place even if there is no ground under you. The best spot I can show this off is on Uprising at the start. There is a ledge that you just can't normally get to. And because you don't start with grenades, this is the perfect spot for this. Check it out. And the reason why is I like to know how long this takes in real time. There was the tantrum, by the way. Moving on to the Dead Alive glitch. The Dead Alive glitch is simply spawning in a teammate as a dead body. How this works depends on some very specific things happening in the code to force your co-op partner to return as a body instead of a player. But the best instance of this is on Oracle in the elevator section at the very beginning. Basically, you kill your teammate and you delay their spawn, you line up in a specific spot, and they spawn in as a dead alive body if you've done everything correctly. Why this is important is because the elevator, you have to fight stuff. It's like a 2.5 minute waiting period, and you can't just skip it normally because there's a death barrier. But if you spawn in your teammate as a dead body, even though, it is a dead body, but they're alive at the same time, they can pass through the death barrier and successfully skip the elevator. It's actually pretty nuts. I'll have a little bit more on this later. Up next, the pressure launch. One of the best tricks in Halo 2 Anniversary. This is used on Oracle to make yourself invincible the entire back half of the mission. The pressure launch itself is simple. You just press the button on the elevator, and as it goes up, you press it again and walk under the elevator. When it comes back down, you go through it instead of getting crushed, and you get launched really, really high. Where the invincibility comes from is that Bungie coded the player to be invincible during the elevator ride up. Why? I don't know, but they did. The player is supposed to lose that invincibility once the elevator docks at the top where the cables are. But if the elevator never reaches the top, then the invincibility never goes away. This glitch literally made Oracle one of the easiest levels to beat on Legendary. I want to make a note here because this glitch is so rare that I couldn't even find footage of it, and it's literally never happened to me. But there is a potential soft lock on Oracle where if one of the sentinels in the cable cut room breaks a cable while the player is on the way up the elevator shaft, your game literally gets soft locked. Since the platform actually moves after each cable cut, if this happens before you reach the top, the elevator keeps just going straight up, but you go up to nowhere. The only proof of this I have comes from Mr. Monopoly himself. Maybe one day someone else can get lucky enough to experience this. On the topic of launches, I'd like to bring to your attention the gravity jump at the end of Quarantine Zone. It's fairly simple. All you're doing is jumping 3 times based on a visual cue, but why this works is what makes it so good. So this gondola is moving at a very high rate of speed. You don't really notice because it's so big, but you're really hauling it. The glitch is at the top of the elevator. Getting up there is really easy. You just walk around and walk up a slant and you're up there. And, because you're near the outer edges of the gondola, so to speak, you can abuse the physics of the high rate of speed and capitalize with an insane launch to the end of the mission. Another launch is on Regret. This one took years for people to understand. I call it the slingshot launch because it's almost like you're getting ricocheted off the gondola. How this works is by overlapping triggers in the game that are never supposed to overlap. And without going into too much detail, you essentially are making the gondolas be in 2 different places at the same time. Using a despawn trick by constantly meleeing to make the game think you're in combat, at least that's my theory, you can push a trigger timing to happen on top of another trigger. Basically, these triggers make the gondola travel to and from the towers, and when you overlap them, the game doesn't know what to do. So you start seeing the gondolas disappear and reappear over and over. How this gets fixed is by progressing the script, which in this case is literally just killing the enemies based on an audio cue. Now, this is a little more complicated than I'm letting on, but you make those 2 different scripts correct or finished at the same time. And while that's happening, you need to be in a very specific position on top of the gondola. Once those scripts finish, the game will make the corrections, so to speak, and the gondolas instantly teleport to their intended positions, and that's what flings Chief to Narnia. Literally, you can hit the edge of the map, and if that wasn't there, to be honest, I really don't know how far you go. Let's shift now over to another glitch called Super Bounce. This glitch is specific to tick rate and frame rate. You can mod MCC to make this work, but for the most part, this is a classic-only glitch, which means you would need the original game in either an Xbox 360 or an OG Xbox, either or. Super bouncing happens when your hitbox is displaced and you land in between where polygons connect. This is only the tip of the iceberg. In order to get displacement that works for super bouncing, you need to find a part of the wall that extends so you can crouch under the edge of it. Once crouched, you let go of crouch, and what happens is your character tries to stand up but can't because of the wall above you. This is the displacement you need. Once crouched, you simply run and jump off of the desired edge to get the desired bounce. Side note, once you get uncrouched from the wall, don't stop moving. Constant movement is what keeps your hitbox displaced. The second part of this trick is based on how high you jump from and the velocity of character movement while falling. Not every bounce is the same. It's not that simple. Some bounces, you can simply just jump off and free fall to the desired location. Other bounces, you need to hold forward the whole time or hold forward right until you land, and sometimes you have to free fall and then hold forward at the end. It takes a lot of experience to be able to tell what needs to happen and where. The beautiful thing about super bouncing is that you can literally bounce anywhere that 2 polygons connect. The easiest way to tell this is by just looking at the ground. All of the textures back then were pretty low quality, so finding bounce spots is easy. On the complete opposite side, we have debouncing. The only difference here is that debouncing sends you through the ground and into void space. Or, I guess, if there was a room below you, you could debounce into that room. How this happens is when you are too perfectly centered in between the polygons you're trying to land on. Because your hitbox is offset, you just slide right through the ground. This is super unlikely most of the time, but of course, in a deathless run, the worst always happens. Check out this regret clip. That one I think I need to be more to the right. I think I know what to do. From here, like this.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Ghosting is the next topic of hitbox offset. This is also a classic only glitch, and if you're familiar with any type of run-in campaign, you've seen this on Cairo State. The difference here between ghosting and super bouncing is that for super bouncing you need displacement upward, which is why you get the displacement by crouching. Ghosting, you need displacement behind you. How you achieve this is by bumping into certain objects a specific amount of times. This will generate what we like to call screen shakes. It's subtle to the untrained eye, but tracking screen shakes is how you know when you're ready to phase through the wall. Now, this doesn't work on every wall. You can't just skip everything and phase through the wall. There are some pretty specific circumstances to make this work. The wall has to be fairly thin, and you also have to have a solid, stable object in order to actually displace your hitbox. All in all, there's still a lot to learn with ghosting, even though runners have known about it for years. It feels like the more time that goes by, the more questions we seem to have.
Not enough.
Ah! Flip that. I just ghosted through the floor.
All right. Here comes the baw! Okay, I know that was stupid. Alright, it's breaking all walls. Baw. This glitch is used pretty much only in custom games, but all you're doing is stacking up so many grenades next to each other that you're almost getting teleported when they explode. You can get anywhere from 10 to 30 grenades into a pile, depending on the desired wall you want to break. It's simple. You stack the nades and throw one behind the big pile. Once they hit you, you go through walls. And speaking of walls, I know you've heard of the term head glitching. That's our next big trick. All you do is hold forward into any wall that is either 90 degrees or is acute. This works for both Chief and Arbiter. Why this works? I'm glad you asked. The enemies in Halo 2 determine where the player is based on where your head is located. They can't actually see your body. So if you put your head inside of a wall or void space, they will only know wherever your last position was, wherever they last saw you. The other side of head glitching is lefty peeking corners. Your character hitbox offsets to the right, so you can peek around left corners to shoot enemies and they will not be able to see you. This works in multiplayer as well as campaign. Then we have corner riding, one of my favorites. Once again, a classic only trick. Yeah, I know, 343 broke Halo, what's new? Corner riding only works on obtuse angles or perfect 90-degree angles. The only real good example worth mentioning is on Uprising. At the very start of the mission, you can slide all the way down to the water. How this works is by riding down the corner, back and forth over where the polygons of the wall connect. By holding forward into the wall and moving back and forth over the corner, you clip your character model inside the wall and slow yourself down. This will repeatedly reset your fall timer. Man, Classic was the best. You will never guess what comes next. ICG, or the Infinite Camo glitch. Yet another Classic-only glitch lost to time. This glitch gives you permanent invisibility. Yes, permanent. This requires the Envy Skull from Delta Halo and a checkpoint. You activate Camo, and while camoed, get a checkpoint. Start, save, and quit, and then hard reset your console. The hard reset removes Envy from being active, as back then there was no menu to turn skulls on and off. What's going on is that the game knows that you reset the console, so it takes away the Envy skull. But it forgets that you had Envy during the checkpoint. Thus, when you load back up your recent save, you'll be permanently invisible. I know you're gonna have some fun with this one. And this save and quit glitch brings me to the only other glitch that I have never personally encountered. Normally I like to get all the footage myself, but this glitch is so rare, I only know of one video of its existence,